and I'm gonna talk about a new application called ChartSmith that we've been working on really recently. I'm gonna do most of the time here is going to be in a demo, kind of showing the product, but talk about like why we're building it and like and how it actually works. So to start, ChartSmith is an AI agent that can help you develop or maintain or both your Helm chart. And that will help you get to industry standard best practices, our best practices that we see out in the field, help you get your application ready to distribute and make sure it's successful. And when we talk about why that is, it's like, as you know, like we're really encouraging everybody to package your application with Helm and then distribute with embedded cluster with different replicated technologies. But one of those is just let your customer do a Helm install. If they're a very opinionated customer, they should be able to just do a Helm install. So you want high installation success. And to do that, that application that Helm chart has to be compatible with all of these kind of complex environments. The customers who want to do a Helm install, turns out that they're very opinionated. That's the reason they need to do a Helm install. And so you need to make sure that the application has all of the support needed for that environment. And what's hard about creating Helm charts? Why do we need to do this? Helm charts should be pretty easy, right? It's a standard packaging technology. It can be, but as anybody here who's been, most folks here probably have actually created and maintained Helm charts, and they know, like, first, it's just string unstructured data that can get really complex and big over time. It's also a very unopinionated tool. There's a lot of ways to do stuff. If you just need to do something like add a database in or add a secret in, you have to figure out what the best way is that you can do that that's going to be compatible with environments that are running, different parts of the chart, have their secret management stored different ways, have different storage, all this stuff. There's not really a single right way to do it to add to most things in Helm, so you have to figure out how. And then they just get really complex over time. Like these helpers.tpl subcharts, values YAMLs grow longer and longer and longer over time. How do you know how much to add in initially? And last thing before kind of jumping into the demo that I wanted to share is like, why can't you just use Cursor, ChatGPT, or other AI tools for this? Why did we decide let's build something for this? And the answer is like, we're just using these foundational models also underneath the hood, but LLMs are really good at code gen if you know what to ask for. And if you know how to like evaluate the responses that they're actually giving you to make sure that they're not hallucinating, make sure you're getting the right thing. So we'll be really transparent here about how ChartSmith works, what it's doing, but it is actually just using other models underneath the hood. And we built a really good, what we think is a good application on top of it that focuses on these things, right? Like, so you can just say, I want to do this. I want to add this to my chart. We can deliver it and then make sure that it's actually valid. So let's dive into a demo. And I'm going to try to do two demos here to show two different use cases. The first one is going to be, I have an existing Helm chart that has some complexity. Let's talk about how ChartSmith works there. And the other one is, I don't have a Helm chart. I need to create one. We're going to start. I'm just going to grab an existing Helm chart and upload it. So this is just a Helm packaged Helm chart. And once I upload it, the one that I'm picking here is an application called Octeto. I just downloaded this from Artifact Hub because it's a complex Helm chart. There's like 90, 100 different YAML files in it. So you can actually see how this works with a pretty complex chart. So I uploaded it. ChartSmith takes me here to the editor. And now it's actually trying to render out the chart. It's actually going to run Helm dep update, which is going to pull in all the dependencies. And then from there, it's going to actually render out each of the manifests so that we can make sure that it is a valid and working Helm chart. I can click through the editor and see all the different files that we have. And I have a chat. This is going to be very typical for most applications, like most LLM style applications. So the chat can actually function in two different modes. One is as an end user, does it do something? And the other one is as a chart developer, let's make a change to the chart. So we can click, right now it's just set on auto detect. So it's going to detect the intent of my question, who I'm asking it as. But I can actually specify it if I want to. Let's actually ask, does this chart support ingress? And so it's going to look, it's going to generate a response. It determined that that's like an end user question. Hopefully that's what it determines. It did. Yeah, the Helm chart supports ingress functionality. And we can read all the details here. It says it's going to support two Nginx ingress controllers. Okay, and why and how to actually configure it. So I could ask questions, how would I deploy this in OpenShift, things like this. But let's say I'm the chart developer and now I want to make a change to the chart. Let's add support for Trafic. And so this is going to be asking, now I'm asking for a change to the chart itself. And so ChartSmith doesn't just make the change. ChartSmith is actually going to go ahead and analyze all the files and create a plan. And it says, here's what I want to do in order to make this change, and give you an opportunity to review it, provide feedback, iterate on that plan before actually implementing it. So we'll let this finish the plan for a second. I'm not going to read this whole plan on this call right now, but you can see here it says the general approach is going to be to add support for Trafic. We have to modify values YAML, ingress resources, some helpers. It identifies these are the files that it's going to have to modify and probably add some more also. It's going to maintain backward compatibility, and then here's how we're going to test to verify it. I could ask for additional changes here, and we could iterate on this, but I'm going to go ahead and just say, let's proceed with this change right now. So now it's analyzing this plan, all the files, open source, like repos. Like I should mention, we have tools built into ChartSmith so that the LLM can actually query what our best practices are. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but also like Artifact Hub. So when it pulls in Trafic, it's able to like identify what the best subchart is to pull in for, or any dependency, what the current version is. It can query that in runtime. And so now it's making the change. You can see it scrolled down. It started with the values YAML, which is the biggest file that it generally changes. And we can see the diffs that it's actually going to put into here. You can see it's actually adding if values ingress controller nginx. It tries to like make very precise small changes that you can then review and accept or reject with each of them. And you can see it's done with the values YAML. It's got to create or edit these files, and then the plus sign shows it's going to add a couple of files. I'm going to keep talking through this. I doubt it's going to finish this whole thing while we go through it, because it actually is very methodical about each of these. It added a new subchart in. While it's doing this, it's maintaining the old version and the new version. When it's all done, it's going to go ahead and show me the diff. I can accept and reject each one. But once I'm finished with that, it's going to run Helm template on them all and make sure that it's still a valid Helm chart. Because as I mentioned, LLMs, we all know, can like hallucinate, can make up some really bad stuff. So it's going to make sure it's valid. And if it's not, it'll have an opportunity to feed that error back into the LLM, have it actually iterate through and fix the chart to make it a functional chart again. And I can actually see the rendered YAML of each of these. Right now I cannot, because it's actually in the process of editing it. Once it actually does render them, though, it's interesting because I can ask, why did this file was not included when it rendered, and it'll tell you because values build kit enabled is set to false, or whatever the actual answer is there. So this lets me iterate on an existing Helm chart. While that's working, I'm going to show you how we can go 0 to 1 on a new chart. I can actually just say, like, I'm going to take an example of an application called SourceGraph, which maybe you've heard of before. There's open source components to it, so we can actually just act like we want to package this application up as a Helm chart. Let's create. And we'll be really specific here, saying that we want to make sure we add Postgres in. So very similar to what we saw before. It's going to create a plan for how we're going to do this. SourceGraph application, the Postgres database deployed as a dependency with configurable persistence. We can ask more questions about this. You know what? I'm going to actually ask for a change here. Let's make sure the PG vector is enabled. Because I don't want just Postgres, I want Postgres with PG vector. So now it's going to update the plan, give me the updated version of it. This is a bigger request here now because I'm going to create a brand new Helm chart. Let's say go ahead and create that chart. And it's going to create the file. So now one of the things you'll notice here is we actually have a bootstrap chart that we start everything with. This is because we've taken basically Helm create and added some best practices into it. I didn't show this here, but probably in here it actually said that it was going to add the replicated subchart in for our SDK. But now it's going to go ahead and just edit. Most of these are actually getting created as new files. And so it's going to go through this entire process, and we'll see the SourceGraph Helm chart get created. While that's running, I'm going to hop back over here to the first one that I did, where I was editing a chart for Octeto. And you can see it's finished. They're all done. I can pick a file. And I can move the zoom window out of the way. I can accept or reject these files. I can iterate through them all, see them all. If I click these up and down arrows, I'm just going to go ahead and accept all of them. So they all went away. And now I have this version of the Helm chart. So I can actually then now make another prompt or ask additional questions about it and keep iterating on it. Source graph is going to keep editing over here to create the first version of the chart and show me the progress as it's going. I'm going to switch back over to slides now. I don't have a lot of slides here. I wanted to mostly show the demo, but really, how does it work? Hopefully you saw this when I did it, but the idea isn't, one-shotting these with, I'm going to ask you for a chart and you're going to give me a chart and it's going to work. We actually keep you very in the loop. We think that what ChartSmith can do is like create a plan, pick the right files, get the right context in, and then allow you to look at each of those changes, but then ChartSmith can evaluate it, can have this eval step at the end, which can tell you that this is a very good chart. This actually does continue to work, and then you can accept it, and then you have a functional Helm chart. A couple scenarios that it's really good at right now, dependency management. Example here that I put is, your application requires Postgres. How do you do this, right? If you're thinking about adding Postgres as a dependency to your Helm chart today, if you're creating a new Helm chart or you need to add this in, you have some basic questions. Should you use the cloud native PG operator, Bitnami Postgres? Should you write a stateful set service? How do you think about where secrets should be stored? If you just ask for Postgres into here, ChartSmith can do it with what we think is the best practice for high installation success and compatibility with your end customer environments. Things like it'll make sure the images are available in the top level values YAML so that custom domains work. They don't need to figure that out. It can take multiple charts and create an umbrella chart for them. Another scenario here is end customer compatibility. Let's say you're using compatibility matrix and you have a customer who wants to, your next customer wants to deploy on Oracle Cloud. You try it out, you figure out your application doesn't work because, I don't know, maybe you don't support Oracle Cloud's custom ingress or CNI. You can just ask ChartSmith to add support for Oracle Cloud, and it's going to understand how to do that and give you a version that works on Oracle Cloud. In the bottom sentence, we don't have this in today, but like the goal is here that ChartSmith will then test it on compatibility matrix. So not just running Helm template and render to make sure it works, but we can give it scenarios, give it different values YAMLs, integrate it into compatibility matrix, and actually give you a working chart so you're confident that it's going to work prior to shipping. So today, what ChartSmith can do, and this is a newer application, so it's still in active development. You can start with the prompt and create a new Helm chart. We showed that. You can import a Helm chart that you have and add functionality, iterate on it that you prompt. It might be adding new functionality, but it also could just be questions like, update the dependencies. This is running the Nginx ingress controller, and earlier this week, a security vulnerability was disclosed in it. Like, check my chart to see if I'm vulnerable. If so, update it and give me an updated version. It's a really good use case for this. Look for best practices that are identified by us in the Helm community and apply them. And that will be a list that continues to evolve and change over time. You can ask questions about the chart. So if you're using this, you can actually just ask, will it work on OpenShift? Like how many nodes are required? You can ask kind of any question you want to, and the LLM will be able to understand the chart, the default values. A scenario that we've been using it for too is to be able to say, will this work in this scenario? And if it will, give me the custom values YAML or the flags I need to put on the Helm install command in order to make it compatible with this environment. It's really good at that. Update dependencies, add support for the target environments. When we talk about best practices, I mentioned it a few times, like it will add replicated or Helm community best practices into your chart. Like, what are these? One of the things is to update make sure that custom domains with replicated work with subcharts by hoisting image values. One of the problems that you have generally with subcharts is if I have my application as a chart and then I add Postgres as a subchart, that Postgres values references images, and I don't know how to configure those from the top level chart when I have a custom domain set through replicated. And this will allow you to bring those values into that top level values YAML so that they're available and your customer can actually just specify them, and subcharts will get rewritten also. Add compatibility for OpenShift. This is an interesting one because you have to kind of know what to ask for often when you're working to do this. A lot of enterprises do want OpenShift, but what does that actually mean? It means you need to add support for routes instead of ingress, run as user, run as group need to be set or configurable. It really depends on the application. It's able to look at the chart and tell you whether it's going to work with OpenShift or not, or potentially make changes to it. All secrets and sensitive data should either be generated or referenced with an existing secret pattern. That concept in Helm is pretty popular, but the idea is if you have a sensitive value, an AWS token or whatever that is, an OpenAI token, you can specify it in a values YAML, but that's generally not a very secure way to deploy software. So the other option would be that you've already deployed this secret to the Kubernetes cluster, and then you're able to reference an existing secret in the values YAML that you're specifying so that it's able to. So we'll make sure that the Helm chart supports that pattern. Stateful components generally should be optional. We think that most enterprises will want to run RDS or some other managed database instead of running it in the cluster, but allow them to run it in the cluster. Maybe it's for trial mode, maybe it's for customers who don't have it, but support both patterns. Add support for a wider and wider set of ingress controller storage classes where there's some differences. And I mentioned creating subcharts with umbrella charts. These are just a couple little screenshots I pulled. You can ask questions as the chart developer or the end user. The default's just auto, so it will. The first thing we do when you type a question in, it's going to analyze, like, can this be answered as the developer or can this be answered as the end user, and make the best determination. Not everything should result in a change to the chart if you ask a question. And then we actually go through and make sure the chart renders properly. We'll show the entire output of Helm dep update and Helm template. And then you can actually tap around and click and see the rendered YAML. And if one's not rendered, you can ask why that file didn't get rendered. Often they're conditionally included, but it's going to give you a really specific answer as to why that's conditionally excluded from the rendering by default. And then I want to move a little bit here and talk about what we're thinking about. So this functionality is starting to work right now. We want to do a much deeper integration with Compatibility Matrix. We have a tool that lets you really test Helm charts. So we're going to obviously integrate this in and really make sure that we can, after you iterate on a chart, you have a prompt. As part of that eval loop, we can increase the confidence that it's a good working change by actually testing it on OpenShift or on OKE or AKS. We can actually spin up the cluster and create it. We'll continue to add best practices. This is not going to be a thing that we stop doing. As we discover a new best practice, maybe this change to a subchart that we've been recommending it requires a new value, or it's no longer the best path. A new version of OpenSearch came out that we want to change the way that we're deploying. We'll be able to push that in. We're looking at an agent headless mode, so you don't have to come to this UI. You can actually just run this more as a full headless agent pointed to your GitHub repo that has your Helm chart in it. And so we'll be able to run it more of a GitHub app, look and make pull requests or comment on your team's pull requests if you enable it. So your team will make a change. ChartSmith can pull it down, validate it, make a recommendation, or just basically do basic maintenance on your Helm chart for you, where keeping everything up to date, finding best practices as a new version of Kubernetes comes out, making sure your chart stays in support for those. Potentially looking at how we can integrate this into Enterprise Portal. And I know Grant's going to talk about Enterprise Portal in a little bit, but how we can integrate this into Enterprise Portal. So when you have an end customer who wants to run your Helm chart and your values YAML is 1,000 lines long, which is not that uncommon, they don't have to sit there and go through 1,000 lines and understand everything. They can just ask questions like, how do I run this on EKS 129 using this storage class? And we can actually help give them a custom values YAML or set commands that would work for that. And then things like a Helm docs integration to publish docs for each change. There's a lot that we want to continue to add into here. These are just a few of the examples. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was, can you use it now? It's in a private beta. We're starting to roll it out. You see, I'm using it on ChartSmith.ai here. If you sign up, it'll automatically add you to the wait list. But if you do, we'll keep it. We're watching the wait list, and hit us up. Hit me up in Slack. Hit anybody up in Replicated, and we'll figure out what you're using it for. See if it's going to be a good use case for you right now, or what we need to do to make it. And we'd be happy to onboard you and get some feedback and have you start using it today.